a radical. Fundamental principles of freedom, rational self-interest, and individual rights. This is the Yaron Brook Show.
All right, everybody, welcome to Yaron Brook Show on this Wednesday, August 13th. Back to you from Lisbon, Portugal. Hope you guys are all having a good week. All right, I guess we'll just jump into the news. I mean, I have to admit, the news just gets weirder and weirder as we go. We'll talk more about this, but this administration is very unique. So let's jump in. I mean, we talked yesterday, I think, about the export tax. I think first time in American history. We now have a selective tax on certain goods when the president feels like it, in exchange for export licenses. Both NVIDIA and AMD are now paying 15% or 15% of all sales to China of these specific chips that were just allowed to be sold to China. And this is just unprecedented. It's never happened in American history, as far as I can tell. So there's companies now have to pay for export licenses. And of course, the license was denied to them originally because of national security concerns, right? Otherwise American companies are not restricted in exporting to anybody. The limitations on exports are created by national security concerns. So the national security concerns suddenly disappeared once these two companies were willing to pay 15% of all sales to the U.S. Treasury, which is an interesting feature in and of itself. And then, of course, Besant is really excited about this deal. And he came out and said, there's absolutely no national security concern here. We would not sell any of the advanced chips. So don't worry about national security. So then you have to stop and say, okay, if there's no national security concern, why was the export license denied originally? Why were these companies restricted from selling these microprocessors to China originally? No answer. And of course, Trump is going, well, wait a minute, this is a good deal. So Trump is now saying he's going to consider expanding the arrangement with NVIDIA to export the more advanced chip, the Blackwell chips, to China, which are not allowed right now. NVIDIA is not allowed to sell these chips to China. They're too advanced, national security concerns. And Trump is like going, no, why not? Let's sell them to China. It's like there's no coherence, there's no thinking, there's no strategy. There's no actual consideration of national security issues. There's just guts. There's just emotion. There's just whatever they feel like doing, they're just doing. And this is in that sense, as I've said often, the most authoritarian regime, American regime I've ever seen. I don't think anybody comes close. There's no plan here. There's no long-term vision. There's just whatever Trump feels like doing. Indeed, Besant, who I used to think was the most rational of the people surrounding Trump, but I think he is, over time, and this happens to people who have decent ideas. If you surround yourself with people who are just nuts, and who are completely irrational, if you surround yourself with irrationality, and you continue to serve the irrational, and you continue to justify the irrational, it affects you. It dominates you. So this is what Besant said. I think we could see it in other industries over time. I think right now this is unique, but now that we have the model, and the beta test, why not expand it? So let's create a new form of corporate tax. A new form of corporate tax. I mean, by the way, Trump in his first term lowered corporate taxes quite a bit. One of the best things Trump did in his first term. And I complimented that, and that's the best tax to cut. If you're going to cut a tax, there's no better tax to cut than the corporate tax in terms of just its economic impact. And then they just passed a big, beautiful bill which sustained that tax cut. That is, it was a temporary tax cut, and it was going to expire next year, and they've continued it into the future. So that's all good. But hey, we can selectively increase corporate taxes just on products we want to, whenever we want to do it, for whatever reason we might want to do it. And it brings in revenue. And we're spending like there's no tomorrow, so we need more revenue. We're running out these massive deficits, so we kind of need more revenue. So what the hell? Let's just do it. Best it. I think we could see it in other industries over time. And then, the White House spokesman, Caroline Leavitt, said in a news press briefing, it stands with these two companies. Perhaps it could expand in the future to other companies. I think it's a creative idea and solution. All right, here's the question I have for you, and I'm eager to find out if any of you have an answer to this question. I mean, I'm looking for help here because I don't understand. I just don't understand. What is the problem that this is a solution to? What is the problem? What was the problem of selling these chips to China originally if there's no national security issue? And what is the 15% that the government takes a solution to? I mean, this is, I don't know. I don't know. You guys tell me. You guys tell me. Ian says, export taxes are explicitly unconstitutional. Yeah, but wait a minute. I'm calling it an export tax. Ian, you're calling it an export tax. Trump isn't calling it an export tax. And Bassett isn't calling it an export tax. And who exactly is going to sue them? NVIDIA and AMD are not going to. This is a deal they cut. Who has standing to sue the government claiming this is an export tax and should be stopped? I don't think anybody does. I mean, China. So if you don't call it a tax and you don't create any entity that is losing anything, except for those entities that already agreed to this, then there's no reason you cannot get away with it. So it's great to argue that what the administration is doing is unconstitutional, but there's a whole line of stuff that's unconstitutional that they're doing, and get in line. And again, here in this case, I can't think of who could sue. And it's complete insanity. And the reality is, nobody's calling them on this. I mean, again, a few people on Twitter, but nobody's calling on this. It's just bizarre. And again, and they bombard us. We'll talk about this later when we talk about postmodernism. They bombard you with so much crap like this that you can't keep track. Nobody keeps track. And nobody knows what to do with it. And of course, the most sane voices that are out there, they're in the tiniest minorities. If you're a Democrat, everything's poo-pooed as you're just being partisan. If you're an economist who disagrees with Trump, you're poo-pooed as playing into, the left, and nobody takes you seriously anyway. And you're so overwhelmed as an economist by all the crap that this administration is doing and all the nonsense and all the contradictions that this administration is involved in, every day you're commenting on some new insane thing that they are doing. At some point, people just become, I think, they just can't hear you anymore. Because, I mean, I feel like that way. Oh, again? I'm going to talk about another thing in which this administration is doing, which is crazy and stupid. Again, every day, it gets boring, and you guys don't want to hear it. And I wouldn't be surprised if your people listen to the show, because, yeah, Yaron's just saying what he's been saying. It's difficult. It's very difficult. So again, the Trump administration is now talking about expanding the scope of these export taxes. We're not allowed to call them that because then it would be unconstitutional. If we don't call them export taxes, then it's constitutional and then it's okay. I don't know what category it falls under. I guess the standing would be if there is another company, that is barred from exporting something to China, equivalent to what, similar to what NVIDIA and AMD have, and it could sue that they are getting this deal and that they're not getting an export license, that the company itself is not getting an export license. Let's say Intel had a competing chip. It doesn't, sadly for Intel. And it's not part of this deal. I guess it could sue to say it's being excluded or that it's being forced to pay this 15% when it doesn't want to. But then they'd have to fight with the Trump administration. Suddenly, Intel is not going to do that. We know that. They're sucking up to the administration as much as they can. So who's going to sue? Nobody. And then, God, can you imagine all the products that they can now declare national security threats, then get 15% from the companies, and then declare them okay, and there was never there was never a national security threat to begin with. And as long as, and look, the reality is nobody cares. There's nobody out there who sympathizes with NVIDIA and AMD. They're just rich corporations. They make a lot of money, and they cut this deal. It's voluntary, and I don't know that there's anybody out there who cares enough about the rule of law when it comes to corporations to complain about this. Yeah, I mean, this goes nowhere. It's not a big deal in the press. It's not a big deal anyway, and it brings in revenue to the U.S. Treasury. So why get upset? The deficit is huge. More revenue, good thing, right? All right, so that's where we are. Along similar lines of President Trump just emoting about economics, Trump has basically called up Goldman Sachs. He's chided the president of Goldman Sachs, David Solomon, basically saying that the bank is being wrong in predicting that U.S. tariffs would hurt the economy, and has questioned whether David Solomon should actually be the CEO of Goldman Sachs. So last week, he was questioning whether the CEO of Intel should be the CEO of Intel, and thought that he should quit pretty quickly. And then the CEO of Intel came to Donald Trump and had a meeting with Trump and Bessent and Ludwig, and did the sucking up thing that you do with Donald Trump. And now Donald Trump is praising him, and now it looks like he's got his job, he's keeping his job, and maybe there's some deal with the U.S. government that's going to happen between Intel. Maybe Intel will give the U.S. government 15% of all its revenues in exchange for keeping the CEO. I don't know. Anyway, now Donald Trump, like last week it was Intel CEO. Today it's a CEO of Goldman that Trump doesn't like, and he is now calling maybe this guy should quit, maybe he should resign because he's getting the tariffs all wrong, right? Trump wrote this in his Truth Social, whatever it's called. But David Solomon and Goldman Sachs refused to give credit where credit is due. They made a bad prediction, the effect of tariffs, on both the market repercussions and the tariffs themselves. Trump said Solomon should maybe focus on being a DJ, which is Solomon has a hobby of being a DJ. He DJs at night, I guess, and not bother running a major financial institution. This is what Trump wrote. Yeah. He also, wrote, I think David Solomon, again, should go out and get himself a new economist. Now, the reality is that Goldman's absolutely right. The economy is hurting because of tariffs. It's not doing anywhere near as well as it should be doing. The reality is jobs are barely being created in this economy. That's what we saw from the job numbers coming out of the Labor Department. It's why Trump switched the guy at the Labor Department. But again, nobody's questioning. Trump keeps saying the economy is great. It's the best economy in history. Tariffs have had no effect, maybe even a positive effect. Is this really being questioned? Is this being challenged? Certainly not by Fox News. Certainly not on the right, where they are completely bought in to the fantasies of Donald Trump. So, yeah, it's true that in April, Goldman warned that sweeping U.S. tariffs would weigh on global growth and prompt the Federal Reserve to cut interest rates more aggressively than previously expected. All of that is probably true. Tariffs, without a doubt, are weighing on global growth. Now, we'll talk about tariffs in a minute and why they're not having as big of an impact as maybe one would expect, but they are having an impact. Prices of the stuff that is being tariffed, those prices are going up. They're having an impact on what Americans can buy, or what prices they can buy them. So, yes, and it is not true that foreign governments are paying for them. It is not true that foreign companies are paying for them. It is absolutely a reality. And this came out, you saw this in the CPI numbers that came out yesterday, that those products that have tariffs on them are increasing at really high rates. And the reason the CPI number did not come up much higher yesterday was because oil prices have come down and gasoline prices are therefore cheaper. So we're paying less for gasoline. As I always told you, tariffs are relative price increase. They're not absolute price. They don't cause all prices to go up. They cause relative prices to go up. They're not inflationary in that sense. So what you saw is the tariff goods went up way above 2.7%. And the non-tariff goods, like oil, like gasoline, went down. Why is gasoline prices going down middle of the summer months when demand is typically very high? Question to ask. I'm just asking questions. That's all I'm doing. Anyway, so Trump is now on his second CEO in 2 weeks, asking for the resignation of a second CEO in 2 weeks. And again, very little pushback, very little concern. So far, according to one economist, right, U.S. businesses have shouldered much of the tariff burden, so they have taken the hit in reduced profits. According to the study, so far consumers have absorbed 22% of the tariff costs, but will eventually absorb 67% of the tariff costs if these tariffs follow the same pattern as past tariffs, like the tariffs from 2018. U.S. businesses have shouldered much of the tariff burden. In the latest round of earnings report, companies like Ford and General Motors reported big hits to bottom line because of the effects of tariffs. Now remember, Ford and GM taking big hits to their bottom line means less expansion, fewer jobs, less investment in R&D, corporate profits matter. Now, I know nobody's sympathetic, nobody cares. Everybody loves to hear that corporate America is suffering. But the reality is, prices are going up, corporations are going to become less profitable, American businesses are going to suffer. I don't know if we go into a recession or we don't go into a recession. Predicting recessions, I'm not good at. I know that. But is this a net, not a net, an absolute net, a large negative for American consumers and the American economy? Absolutely, without a doubt. And the positives are trivial and insignificant. Yep. This is the price we pay for having Trump as president. All right. All right. Before we get to tariffs, which we'll talk about in a minute. And by the way, this might go fast today. So if you want to shape the show, if you want to determine what I talk about and kind of dictate the topics, use the super chat, ask questions. I'll talk about whatever you want me to talk about. Just ask about it, and we'll have a conversation. The bigger the question, the more money you put on it, the more time I'll spend on it, and the more the higher priority it gets. So jump in and ask questions. So Friday, this big meeting between Putin and Trump is going to happen. The White House is not setting any kind of expectations about it, because the reality is that neither Trump nor anybody else in the White House know how it will go, because it will completely depend on Trump's mood, Trump's emotions, when it happens. Again, there's no strategy. There's no vision. There's no knowing what you want to achieve. Putin knows what he wants to achieve. Putin's number one goal right now, other than winning in Ukraine, but number one goal beyond taking over Ukraine, is to create a wedge, a significant wedge between the United States and Europe. It's ultimately to draw the United States to leave NATO, or at least to diminish its commitment to NATO. Putin will do everything he can to create conflict between the Europeans and America, because he has ambitions, and his ambitions involve Europe. And the only thing stopping his ambitions right now is the United States. He thinks, I don't think this is true, but he thinks he can take Europe if the United States is not in the picture. I don't think he could take Poland, never mind Europe. But he thinks he can. And he certainly knows he cannot if the US is in the picture. So he needs the Europeans and the Americans to have a falling out. He needs the Europeans and Americans not to be cooperating. He needs the United States ultimately out of NATO. And that's what this meeting is about. There's nothing else to be gained here other than for the United States. Putin knows exactly what he wants again. He wants to piss off the Europeans. He wants Trump to piss off the Europeans. He wants Trump on his side, or at least he wants Trump to be neutral and to step away. And to retract whatever support he's given Ukraine and Europe. So it's going to be an interesting meeting. I think Putin comes into the meeting knowing exactly what he wants. Trump goes into the meeting being clueless, and but wanting peace, wanting a deal, wanting I don't know, to stop the war. But all of that is meaningless. On what terms? Stopping the war is easy. Putin just needs to stop and pull his troops back to his country. Is that what Trump is going to demand? No. So this is a meeting that's basically going to be determined by Putin and his ability to manipulate Donald Trump. And by all precedent, he has that ability. He's really good at it. He's really good at it. All right. Europeans know this. Europeans understand this completely. Zelensky understands this completely, that the only purpose of this meeting is to pull America away from Ukraine, to pull America away from Europe, to create conflict between the United States and Europe and Ukraine. As a consequence, Zelensky is now in Europe. He's in Berlin, I think, today, and convening with European leaders to try to figure out what their strategy is going to be. But they have no idea what's going to actually happen. They're on a Zoom call, I guess, later today or tomorrow with Trump to try to prep him for what Putin has in store for him. I don't think they're going to be very successful. I don't think Trump takes very well to coaching. I don't think Trump takes very well to being told by the Europeans what to do, what to think, or anything like that. So I doubt they're going to be very successful in what they are trying to do. Why are we offline? All right, let's see. Are you guys, are we online? Are you guys seeing a picture? Is the video okay? Sound okay? Can somebody give me kind of a thumbs up or some indication of what the status of this video is? I'd appreciate it. Somebody in the chat, do something, say something. Still here. All right, cool. Because for some reason this is saying I'm offline, but I'm clearly not offline because you're all there. All right, weird. So the Europeans are going to try to convince Trump. I don't know of what. They're going to try to prep him. They're going to try to toughen him up. They're going to try to remind him of his commitments and remind him of his kind of mood when he left the NATO meeting last time, when he was very pro-Europe and all excited about Europe and was very anti-Putin. So whether they can have any kind of impact on him, I just don't know. But that'll be the suspense going into Friday. All right, just a few other notes. A few notes about tariffs. So you remember yesterday we talked about the fact that the Trump administration submitted this ridiculous letter to the court, trying to stop the court from declaring that the president does not have the authority to use the emergency powers in order for these so-called reciprocal tariffs. And the idea was that if the courts now, at this point, if the courts now said that these tariffs are unconstitutional, then this would drive the United States into bankruptcy. This would be an economic disaster of unimaginable scale. I mean, the Wall Street Journal today writes, Trump's doomsday tariff letter, that's how he calls it. He says judges must bless his emergency or will have a depression. I read you the letter yesterday. It was pathetic, right? This is what Trump, by the way, wrote on Friday, last Friday, before this letter was sent to the court. I think this letter was sent on Monday. Quote, if a radical left court ruled against us at this late date in an attempt to bring down or disturb the latest amount of money, wealth creation, and influence the United States has ever seen, it would be impossible to ever recover or pay back these massive sums of money and honor. It would be 1929 all over again. A Great Depression, all caps. And this is how the Wall Street Journal editorial board responds. Wow, ending a tax increase means depression. Who knew? Mr. Trump also seems to think any judge who rules against him is a radical leftist. But the 11 judges who heard the appeal, including Republican and Democratic appointees, Messrs. So and Schumer, these are the two people who signed that letter, parrot Mr. Trump's doomsday prophecies in their letter. And they quote the letter, what we did yesterday. I continue. It's true that foreign countries have pledged to increase investment in the United States in return for avoiding even higher tariffs than Mr. Trump has imposed. But these are non-binding commitments. And the governments wouldn't have to pay anything back, and the government, our government, wouldn't have to pay anything back to countries if the tariffs are blocked. It would have to compensate U.S. businesses that pay the illegal tariffs and with interest. So here's the thing. If American businesses paid the tariffs, and they did, one way or the other, only American businesses paid the tariff. If the courts ruled them unconstitutional, there's no money flowing from the U.S. overseas because nobody overseas pays the tariffs. The money would be returned to U.S. businesses. So the letter and Trump are exhibiting such blatant ignorance of just the mechanisms of the deals they cut. The Wall Street Journal continues, obtaining a refund would be a bureaucratic mess and take years. But putting an end to this tax increase would also be a relief to thousands of businesses. The U.S. Chamber of Commerce recently estimated that the Trump tariffs will cost the average small business importer $856,000 a year. Consumers, notably, won't be able to seek refunds for tariff costs passed on to them. The letter to the federal circuit judges illustrates the Trump style. Try to intimidate by exaggerating the impact of a decision he doesn't like and suggest he'll blame the judges. We trust the judges won't fall for it. If they do rule against the president and he appeals, we hope the Supreme Court quickly takes the case. So good for the Wall Street Journal. Wall Street Journal, is standing up against some of the bigger abuses of the Trump administration, and they should get credit for that. I'm not talking about the front page of the Wall Street Journal, which has always been kind of tilted left. I'm talking about the editorial page and the editorial board of the Wall Street Journal, which has always been, call it conservative, but tends to be and still holds on to a little bit of a belief in markets, not capitalism, but a little bit of a belief in markets. In addition, 27 prominent economists have come out again, swinging in the U.S. court against Trump's emergency tariffs. They write that trade deficits aren't, quote, unusual and extraordinary or a threat to the United States. This is Trump is using an emergency declaration to justify the tariffs, but they're not unusual, they're not extraordinary, and they're not a threat. And the economists are also saying the tariffs won't meaningfully reduce trade deficits, but will have other major economic effects. So this is in an amicus brief that was filed by a series of economists against the Trump administration and the Trump administration's. Let me see. I wonder if there's. I'm looking to see if I can find the signatories, who these economists are. But absolutely, this is good stuff, and I'm glad to see some economists, and these are conservative economists, because this I think is published by the American Institute, the American Enterprise Institute, which is a right wing. But I'm just looking at some names. Let's see if we know any of the names. Darren Asemoglu, who just won the Nobel Prize. He's not a conservative, but he just won the Nobel Prize in economics. Stephen Davis, who is the director of research at the Hoover Institute. Let's see. Jason Furham, we quoted him yesterday. Again, not a conservative. Samuel Gregg is a conservative. Is president and Frederick Hayek Chair in Economics at the Institute of Economic Research, the American Institute of Economic Research. Let's see who else. Douglas Holtz-Aiken, not, again, a well-known economist. Mankow, who is at Harvard University and is a conservative, a relative conservative. Jeffrey Myron, who is a senior lecturer and director of graduate program at the economics at Harvard, also a free market guy. He's a director of research at Cato. Let's see, Michael Strain, who is from the American Enterprise Institute. And anyway, so you got 27 credible economists writing against this. Yeah, you could, let me just do something, sorry. Right. Let's see. So yes, so you've got a conservative filing an amicus brief. You've got pretty much any free market free market economist knows how corrupt and wrong these tariffs are, and really anybody defending these tariffs doesn't know what they're talking about from an economic perspective, or from a political perspective, or from a global strategy perspective. This is all politics, and this is all PR, and this is all Trump's fantasy. There is no economic justification for these. No, none, zero, and there's none. No, even semi-reasonable economist out there that I know of in the entire United States defending these tariffs. Now, what's interesting about the tariffs, and I'll give you this, is because I think even within the Trump administration, they realized that if they took these tariffs seriously, they would be really bad for this country, and they would actually cause real economic destruction. They're not taking them that seriously. So, for example, the big bombast was made about 35% tariffs on Canada, right? 35% on Canadian products. But the reality is that 90% of all the products imported from Canada are covered by the USMCA, that is the NAFTA, the new NAFTA, the new and improved NAFTA, and as a consequence, are tariff-free. So the 35% tariff only applies to non-USMCA goods. So all the rest are tariff-free. Indeed, Canada's central bank says that 100% of energy exports and 95% of other exports, are U.S. Have no tariffs. Almost 90% of Canadian exports appear to have accessed the U.S. market duty-free in April. So I guess it might change from month to month depending on the composition of exports going to the United States. But generally, Canada is exporting stuff basically without any tariff. The same is true of Mexico. Most of the goods coming in from Mexico are coming in tariff-free. The 35% tariff is so targeted, affects so few goods, that it's having very little impact on anybody. It's having very little impact on Canadians, have very little impact on Americans. The 25% tariffs on Mexican goods is again a very thin slice of the trade. It affects only a few products. Most of the products coming in are coming in under the USMCA. The one exception for that is the 25% tariffs on auto, steel, and aluminum, which is outside of the treaty. So let's see, according to the Economy Secretary of Mexico, no tariffs were paid on more than 84% of Mexico's trade with the United States, again, in April. So tariffs are, there's a lot of hype, there's a lot of talk, and luckily for all of us, I think, Trump is not imposing the worst of them. They're still going to have a significant detrimental effect on the economy, but not as bad as they could have if he went all out. Let's see. I'll add that, the tariffs on China were supposed to kick in yesterday. So yesterday, you remember China got an extension, they signed an extension, and they were supposed to negotiate the details of the framework that they had decided. And they got a 90-day extension, and yesterday Trump extended it by another 90 days. So they're still negotiating. He wants rare earth materials. The Chinese want the best chips, the best microprocessors. We'll see how all that turns out. Let's see. Oh, one last thing about tariffs, just so you don't think Trump is the only mercantilist out there. There are other people who are just almost as mercantilist as Trump is. The Europeans are pretty bad. And the good thing about Europe is it has the EU, so it doesn't have tariffs within the EU. But for example, the EU, you would think during this period of tariffs with the United States and a trade war with the US, that the EU would look for free trade opportunities with the rest of the world, and they had a deal. They had a deal with South America. Basically, South America would export raw materials to Europe, and Europe would export manufactured goods to South America, all duty-free. So this would be a trade free between the EU countries and Argentina, Brazil, Paraguay, and Uruguay. So 4 major countries, and this is a no-brainer. Europe needs more trading partners, and this is good for everybody. Zero tariffs is always good. And it was, the trade between the two countries is between EU and these 4 Latin American countries, about $55 billion or billion euros a year. And, this was an easy dunk. And yet, Macron, the French president, objected. Why did he object? Well, it's always the same with France. French farmers didn't like the deal. They're afraid of food imports coming in from South America competing with French produce. Basically, they didn't want the competition. And as a consequence of that, Macron was getting ready to veto the bill and to kill it. He was trying to rally other countries in the EU to support him. And what the bureaucrats in Brussels decided is just to shelve it, put it on the side, not vote on it, so that it wouldn't be dead, maybe hoping that Macron loses the next election. But if he loses, it's to Le Pen. And I don't think Le Pen is going to want more free trade. I don't think the French right wing wants free trade deals with Latin America. So the world is just, it would be so easy to make us all so much richer, so much better off. And yet, our political leaders here in the United States and in Europe, just completely messing this up. All right, yesterday we got a report on government spending for July. And in spite of the fact that, as we've been told over and over and over again by officials in the Trump administration, in spite of the fact that tariff revenue is through the roof, tons of tariff revenue, in spite of all that, U.S. deficit grew to $291 billion just in July, a significant increase over the same month last year. So government spending, way up. Government deficits, way up under this administration. Exactly as I told you it would be. Exactly as I predicted. So Trump is a spender, big spender. He also raised taxes, significant tax increase. And yet he didn't raise taxes enough to compensate for the increased spending, which is driving the deficit higher and higher as we speak. And this is going to have long-term, just disastrous consequences for the United States. But what's also interesting is that in July 2025, 1 out of every 4 tax dollars, 1 out of every 4 tax dollars went to interest payments. Not to protecting your individual rights, not to building infrastructure, not to more welfare, not to, I don't know, subsidies, not to whatever. Interest payments on the debt. 1 in every $4. If you take the amount of revenue that came in July, the amount paid in interest payments on the debt, 1 in 4, 25%. And this is not going to get much better. And even if Powell lowers interest rates, it's not going to make that much difference at the level at which the government is constantly adding to the deficit and therefore adding to government borrowing. And of course, if the Fed lowers interest rates all the way to 0, and you say 0, well, government can borrow at 0. Well, that's not clear because the Fed lowers interest rates to 0. The interest rate they're lowering is the rate at which they pay banks on reserves. That is not the rate at which the market prices government bonds. That the Fed does not directly control and usually does not control. It could go into that market and influence it by buying and selling bonds, and that's trying to influence those rates. But that's not the interest rates they directly rely on, and it's not clear what happens. If the Fed tomorrow lowered interest rates by 3%, which is what Donald Trump wants, my guess is that yields and government bonds would go up because the inflation risk, I think, would be perceived as going up significantly. So yes, your tax money, not that it ever goes to anything particularly useful, but is now being spent on paying bondholders interest. Maybe that's the best thing we could be spending our tax money on. At least it comes back into the private economy in some way. All right. Jonah, not Jonah, what was I saying? There is this story that goes around that the left has pushed for a long time, really going back till, 2018, 2017, 2018, 2019. And the story is that rents in the United States are going up. And the reason rents in the United States are going up is that BlackRock, the largest money manager in the world, is buying up homes, buying up apartment buildings, buying up residential homes, and basically monopolizing homes in particular regions, and then squeezing the American people with higher rents. Private equity is evil, we all know that, and private equity is buying massive quantities of American homes and renting them out to Americans at exorbitant prices, and thus making a profit, and we have to get away from this. And this has been a story going around the left for a very long time, and really has been a dominant feature among the left in their complaints about rent. So, when people say, no, the reason housing prices are going up is because of regulations, zoning, lack of supply, which I always, which I argue for. They say, oh no, the reason housing prices are going up is because the housing stock has been monopolized by actors like BlackRock and other private equity funds. And I think a few years ago, maybe months ago, I can't keep track, we went through some of the graphs and some of the data on this to show how absurdly stupid this is. But what's interesting is that, like almost everything crazy that the left does, like in economics, that almost everything that the left picks up about economics and complains about, I don't know, wages haven't increased, wages have divorced from productivity, the rich are getting rich at the expense of the middle class and the poor. Like any one of these complaints that the left repeats over and over and over again, ultimately what happens is this group of new rightists pick up on it and adopt it. So Charlie Kirk was on some TV, Fox News, on Fox News the other day. This is a couple of weeks ago. And this is what he says. This is what Charlie Kirk says on Fox and Friends. 1 out of 4 of all new home purchases in the last year were out of these firms like BlackRock that come in and are bidding out first-time home buyers. So they're driving up the price. 1 out of 4. Now, that's a stunning claim. 1 out of 4. Now, let's get a few things right. First of all, BlackRock does not buy homes. 0. Charlie and everybody else and the leftist that he follows, he used to follow pro-capitalists, but now he follows leftists. Charlie Cook and the leftists that he follows are confusing BlackRock with Blackstone. I guess it's easy to confuse. Blackstone is much, much smaller than BlackRock. It's a private equity fund, and indeed Blackstone has indeed purchased homes around America. But the reality is they've done very few. Indeed, private equity as a whole is very few. So let me read you something that was written in 2021 because, again, these stories have been around for a long time. And this 25% number that Charlie Cook used is completely made up. I mean, he literally pulled it out of the air. It has no relation to reality whatsoever. He has learned from the left that if you lie, and keep lying, then people will just... Now, I don't know that he knows. I mean, I think he's so ignorant, he probably picked it up from Steve Bannon or picked it up from some other world-class economist and just repeats it. But if you repeat it, then it becomes mythology. Everybody agrees. Nobody questions it anymore. So here's just some numbers. I'm reading from an article that Derek Thompson wrote in 2021 about this. The U.S. has roughly 140 million housing units, a broad category that includes mansions, tiny townhouses, and apartments of all sizes. Of those 140 million units, about 80 million are standalone single-family homes. Of those 80 million, about 15 million are rental properties. Of those 15 million single-family rentals, institutional investors own about 300,000. Most of the rest are owned by individual landlords. What? I want to repeat that. Of the 80 million single-family, residences, 15 million are rental properties. 15. Of the 15 million, 300,000 are owned by institutional investors. So of the 80 million, again, 80 million rental properties, 300,000 are owned by private equity. Right? So a real estate rental company, Invitation Homes, in which BlackRock is an investor, owns about 80,000. 80,000 out of 80 million. That's what? 8 million is 10%, 800,000 would be 1%. This is 1/10 of 1% of the rental stock. It's owned by BlackRock. And it's Blackstone, not BlackRock. So again. So it's completely made up, this stuff. It's just completely untrue. Blackstone owns 0.06% of all single-family housing stock. Other institutional investors own about 0.5%, 0.5% of all single-family rentals. I mean, almost all rentals are, people like you and me buy a few houses and then rent them out. So a big chunk of this, I mean, most homes are owned by the people who live in them, but then there's some homes that are owned by people who own 1 to 9 units. That's a big chunk. And then a few homes are owned by people who own 10 to 99 units. And then even smaller section are owners that own 100 to 99 units. And anybody who owns more than 1,000 units, that is such a tiny sliver of a percentage, less than 1%, well, way less than 1%. So I'm just here debunking the BS of left and right. And it's not left and right anymore. It's not left or right anymore. It's left and right anymore, because it turns out that the economic bullshit is now common to both left and right. They completely agree on economics. But this whole discussion, and really the everything we've been talking about the Trump administration, and the export tax and the firing CEOs and the on and off again tariffs and on and off again Ukraine and blaming Zelensky for Ukraine for the war, and just the ongoing irrationality, the different court filings, the disrespect for the Constitution, the disrespect for the rule of law more broadly. They're taking, they're sending troops into the streets of Washington, D.C. and claiming that there is carnage in the streets of America when when crime in D.C. is way higher than it should be, but it's lower than it was a year ago, 2 years ago. And it's heading downwards. Just the lying, the constant, completely disregard for truth and evidence and reality that this administration has is really unique. And I really do think, and Jennifer says spins her head, yeah, it's head spinning, and it's nonstop, and it doesn't slow down. They are constantly making stuff up, lying to you and me about everything. And they are contradicting themselves, and they don't care. So it's a national security threat until it's not a national security threat, because we're getting 50% of the revenue. There was another one that, the tariff. In the first court filing, they say, "Oh no, we can stop these tariffs anytime. There's no, you don't have to put an injunction on it now, because even if you let it continue, at any time we can do away with it." And now, oh no, if you do away with the tariffs, if you rule them unconstitutional, it's 1929. We're heading towards a Great Depression, and it's constantly they're contradicting each other. They don't care. They don't care. We can't bring the guy back from El Salvador. Oh, he's back. It's exhausting, it's head spinning, it's tiresome. And really what this all boils down to is I really do think this is that the right, the new right, and in particular this administration, basically taken basically have adopted postmodernism. This really is the first postmodern administration. And what do I mean by postmodern? Postmodernism holds. There's no truth. There's no one single authoritative account of anything. Not in literary interpretation or art criticism, which was their original kind of where they came from. Not in language itself. Again, they analyzed language and said, there's no authoritative account. There's no one interpretation. Not in science, not in history, or economics. So there's no truth in economics, and there's no authoritative account in economics. It's whatever, in a sense, you make up. It's whatever your perspective happens to be. It's whatever the angle that you have on it. Don't confuse me with the Labor Department employment numbers. I mean, I know that they're wrong. So I know the facts are different, or who cares about the facts? You just produce numbers that are more reflective of what I want them to be. And certainly, so no truth. There's no authoritative account of anything. And, of course, history, journalism, history, economics, and all these things, and of course, none in journalism or anything associated with mass media. All of that is perspective, point of view, interpretation. And this used to be the position of the left, right? And this was part of how the New York Times and much of the mainstream media veered even further towards their bias because they rejected the idea of objectivity. They rejected the idea of truth. It was all about narrative. It was all about who told the story and what perspective they had on telling the story. And in journalism school, journalists were taught that there was no such thing as objectivity as real facts. You're just telling a perspective. Everything is a perspective. There's no reality. There's no truth. And this used to be what the left was all about, or at least kind of the woke left was all about. And it's completely, it's not turned around because much of the left still holds this, but now it's being completely embraced by the right. I mean, the whole contempt for expertise and any kind of facts, the rejection or suspicion, or I'm just asking a question about history. I don't know, maybe Hitler wasn't as bad as they think he was. I'm just asking questions, is what they tell you. Right? We don't know what really happened. And there are these people who have alternative histories, these historians, and they have an alternative set of stories. Let's not call them facts. Maybe they're right. I'm just asking questions. So let's look for them. By the way, there's an article about this in The Atlantic this week, about this idea of postmodernism and the right. So, there's no experts. This was Joe Rogan's whole thing, right? I mean, why not have a comedian who knows nothing about the Middle East comment on the Israeli-Palestinian issue? Let's do it. Why not? Why can't he be viewed as a world expert as much as somebody who studied the field and really thought about it for years and years and maybe visited there and seen what it's like on the ground? I mean, why do we have to treat experts differently than just anybody who has a view about the topic? Isn't having a view enough? Isn't having an opinion enough? It was Joe Rogan, right? And of course, Tucker Carlson constantly. Yeah, can't trust any of the experts, so we have to bring to the show, people who have alternative views. Are they based on facts? Well, what is a fact? Who's to tell what a fact is? How are you going to discover what facts are? And all we're doing is asking questions. I mean, if you describe what, the kind of rhetoric and the kind of attitude Foucault and the rest of the postmodernists had towards reality, towards facts, towards journalism, towards history, towards, I don't know if they talked much about economics, but I'm sure it applies to economics. You would get the Trump administration and the new right. Yeah, and only read things that you have labeled as non-progressive. God forbid you actually read something coming from one of those progressive rags. You can't judge an article by actually reading it and evaluating the content of the article. Don't do that. Just judge it by its cover. If it has the New York Times on it, or the Washington Post, or the Atlantic, or for that matter, the Wall Street Journal, what the hell? Just dismiss it because it's exactly that. It comes from that rag. You don't have to read it. There's no point in reading it. What's the point of reading anything? Because it's obviously not what you think. And it's obviously not being stamped with a stamp of approval from the Trump administration. And therefore, it must be crap. It's exactly the kind of nonsense that creates the mindless mentalities that are just the Trump zombies. The mindlessness. I mean, postmodernism is exactly exactly describes how this administration functions. Contradictions, who cares? Contradictions don't matter. What matters is perspective, emotion. Oh, Anne has actually read The Atlantic before making the call. Wow. Why are you wasting your time on a progressive rag, Anne? And I haven't read it? So when I say there's an article in Atlantic about this that's pretty good, it means that your evaluation of my assessment is I'm an idiot. I'm an idiot. I read an article in The Atlantic, which is a progressive rag, and therefore I can't judge it, and therefore I should just dismiss it because it's a progressive rag. What are you talking about, Ann? So you're either insulting me or you're just speaking out of nothing. Trump is a postmodernist. I mean, he acts like a postmodernist. I don't think he's anything. He's a mafia thug. He has the mentality of a mafia thug. But they're capitalizing on postmodernism. And Charlie Cook can go on television and just lie through his teeth. And nobody will call him on it. Nobody on the right will call him on it. I mean, some free market economists will. But nobody on the right will call him on it. Because it doesn't matter. The only thing that matters is it's achieving the effect. So, I mean, the article is spot on, and it's not the only article. I mean, there's been a lot of connections between the new right and postmodernism. I think James Lindsay has basically made a great point about this. He basically, I mean, he did this trial. This is not about the Trump administration. This is about the new right generally. He did a trial. He basically grabbed language from the Communist Manifesto, changed left-wing kind of examples and tone and made it sound right-wing. And he took this article based on the Communist Manifesto and submitted it to an online conservative journal. And it was accepted. The American Reformer ran the piece under the headline, "The Liberal Consensus and the New Christian Right." And he basically ripped this off from the Communist Manifesto. It was a completely made-up article. And of course, Lindsay did this in the past to left-wing publications. He wrote garbage down and he submitted it and they accepted it. Well, he did the same thing to the right. And the right today is in the same place as the woke left was. And when he revealed the hoax, instead of repudiating its inadvertent endorsement of Marx and Marxism, this conservative journal embraced it. It says, quote, "While we were unaware of its authorship and motive, it is still a reasonable aggregation of some new right ideas, repackaged into Marx's effective rhetoric, and we have corrected its authorship to properly credit Mr. Lindsay." So they're not embarrassed by the link to Marx. They'll take it on, absolutely. I mean, if you think about the way what do you call it? Postmodernism is categorized: disdain for quantitative measures and hard evidence. Well, does that not represent Tucker Carlson, Donald Trump, Scott Bassett, Charlie Cook? Absolutely, it does. Sensationalize your language. When in doubt, be murky. When stating the ludicrous, be melodramatic. I mean, that's the letter to the judges that the Solicitor General wrote. That's Trump's every single one of his tweets is exactly that. It's their whole attempt to defend tariffs is that. It's complete disdain for quantitative measures and hard evidence, and it's sensationalizing and melodramatic. I mean, we're heading towards a Great Depression. Is melodrama if ever there was one? I mean, this is pure Trumpism and Trump administration. And, this goes throughout this administration of constant lying, constant deception, constant flip-flopping, constant manipulation, constant hysteria. How many emergencies are being declared by this administration? How many emergencies need to be dealt with immediately? All in the name of violating our rights, of increasing our taxes, of rounding up people in the streets of America and deporting them. And if mistakes are made, big deal. They're not, and, all in the name of complete disregard for the rule of law. I can't think of another administration that was this consistently disregard evidence, facts, truth. They were all bad. All of them are bad. But these guys are worse than anybody. And if you look at the playbook of the postmodernists, they're following it to the T. Maybe that's because all irrationality ultimately boils down and looks the same. Yep. Anyway, it's quite a mastery, and it's, I guess you'd say it's ironic, but irony is not the exact right term. It's very distressing that we now have two left-wing political parties, that we now have two, in a sense, postmodern political parties, that we now have, without any question, you can argue about the postmodernism, we now have two anti-capitalist political parties. Not just one political party that's just, shrugs at capitalism, but clearly, actively anti-capitalist political party, as the Republican Party has become. That we now have political parties, think about Trump. Maybe the best example of this kind of lurch to complete divorcing yourself from reality is RFK at the Health and Human Services, who just pulled the grants to all, what is it, mRNA vaccine, to all mRNA vaccines, because he said they're dangerous. And then when Jay, whose family name I can't pronounce, who's the head of the FDIC, I think he's a Stanford professor who was, is pretty well regarded and stuff, was asked about this. His argument, he didn't repeat RFK because he's too good of a doctor to do that. He knows that mRNA vaccines are productive and efficacious. He said all the research funding was pulled because the public has no trust in them. Isn't your job to help them gain that trust if they're good for their health? Isn't that part of what your job description is? But that's the thing. They're going to switch explanations constantly. They're not going to stick to a single thing. Everything is to cover up. Everything is cover up. Everything's, the RFK is a devout anti-vax. He hates anti-vax. He hates mRNA. He's destructive to American health. He's destructive to innovation in healthcare. The consequences are mind-boggling for having this guy run Health and Human Services. And it doesn't seem to really matter to anybody, because it doesn't matter. It's, he's not, it's the Trump administration. They can do no wrong. They can do no wrong. And we just have to grin and bear it. And since they're not leftist, at least they're not declared leftist, they are leftist in their fundamental mentality. And others are just going to go along with it. Well, I mean, this is good. At least it's not Biden. At least it's not Obama. So, to hell with the truth. tell with facts, tell with evidence, tell with science. We don't need science. We know mRNAs are bad. We feel it. And MAGA told us, and they know it. And RFK is a well-known scientist who has studied this area, and he can tell you that mRNAs are dangerous. And they had no impact on COVID, didn't save any lives, nobody's. Indeed, they killed millions, tens of millions of people were killed by mRNA vaccines. This is the story they tell you. This is the bullshit that you hear on a daily basis from our supposed experts, from the people who are running things. I mean, the damage this administration is doing to health institutions, to our perception of health, the damage this administration is doing to our trade, to our geopolitics, the damage this administration is doing to our economy is just, it's just stunning. And on a scale that we will pay for it for decades to come. Because you're gonna have to get in a world and where government funds all basic biological science. Yes, mRNA is banned, basically, right? If you withdraw suddenly all the money that you have committed for funding research into mRNA, that is basically the equivalent of making that area of science disappear. And you've announced it's unsafe. You've announced it unsafe. Now again, Anne continues to pursue this, I will defend anything that they do, no matter what. And somebody will come back at me, but we're against government funding of science. Yeah, we are. But if you're going to fund science, and the government is funding science, then it should be done, I don't know, scientifically, not quackerily, based on quackery, which is what is being done right now at HHS. If you ban, if you retract all scientific funding from a field, then right now, then you're killing that field. You're the equivalent of banning that field. And yes, everybody should do their own research. You should study mRNA vaccines and see how unbelievably safe they are. God. The conspiracy theories and the bullshit about this stuff is just unbelievable to me. I mean, this is not hard. The stats on mRNA, the stats on the COVID vaccines are not hard. Not hard. Right. It's an amazing technology that not only could provide us with safe vaccines for all kinds of things, including potential new viruses that might come down the road, but it's an incredible technology that could help us cure cancer, cure other diseases. And you're basically making it persona non grata. You're making it not acceptable to the United States government. I hope, and this is what's going to happen. I know what's going to happen. The Chinese are going to develop mRNA vaccines. They're going to work very hard on mRNA vax. And they will have the technology, and we will not. And they will do all kinds of stuff with mRNA that will help their own population, and we will not. We will fall behind. All right, that is the news and my commentary on it for this Wednesday, August 13th. All right, let's, Anne is becoming the new Scott. I mean, she does this, right? So it's the same technique as Tucker Carlson uses, right? She says, look, I'm not inherently against it. I'm just asking questions. I'm just asking questions. We should all ask questions. Shouldn't we ask questions? It's so dishonest. It's such a dishonest technique, right? I'm not going to say anything bad about RFK, but I'm not supporting RFK. I'm just asking questions about why Yaron hates RFK so much. Maybe there's something else going on here. All right, or the Atlantic Magazine, or for that matter, anything else. All right, we are open for questions, super chat questions. As you know, we have targets on this show, and I know that. It's hard when I start at 12 to reach our targets. It seems a lot more difficult at this time slot, 12 p.m. East Coast time, to generate the kind of super chats that are necessary to make our targets. But we need to. This is a show funded by you. Without you, I can't do this. I have to stop. So please consider supporting the show. Please consider doing stickers and asking questions and asking about anything, things you don't agree with me on. Ask away. Challenge me. Challenge me. Too few of these questions are challenging. They might be snarky sometimes, but almost none of them are challenging. Am I pessimistic today? Yeah, I mean, every time I prep for these shows, I get a little pessimistic because I look for good news and I look for silver linings and I look for things that might be better, and I just don't find them. I mean, every day, it seems like every day I discover this administration is worse than I thought it was, and I already thought it was really, really bad. All right. Reminder: we have 3 sponsors for the show: Hendershot Wealth, hendershotwealth.com, Hendershot 2 T's at the end.com/YBS. They offer a variety of different products, but one of the products they offer really does reduce your exposure to capital gains taxes and defers them and makes it possible for you to save a lot of money on taxes, a lot. So I encourage you to check it out. Check out the interview. Drop me an email if you're interested. I'm happy to discuss it with any of you guys that are interested in this, just the finance of it. But the best thing is to talk to Robert Hendershot himself, which you can do if you sign up on their website. You can schedule a one-on-one with Robert and see if it applies to your situation. If you're about to sell a business, if you're thinking about selling your business in the future, or you have lots of appreciated stocks and maybe you're living off of that stock and you're paying the capital gains, you should definitely talk to Robert about your situation. Alex Epstein, as you know, Alex Epstein is the world expert on climate change, on environmentalism, on fossil fuels and energy, and just a brilliant mind, constantly writing, constantly communicating, articulating the message of freedom in the realm of energy and fighting for it in Washington, D.C. So sign up, read his Substack, alexepstein.substack.com. You will learn a lot. You will become a much better communicator about these ideas. And these are things that come up all the time at work, family dinners, all over the place. I'm sure you know people who are completely bought into the idea that we're killing ourselves by using fossil fuels. Check out Alex. Alex will give you the talking points that you need in order to defend, I think, the position most of you already hold. Finally, the Ayn Rand Institute. Remind you, they have an Ayn Rand Institute app. On that app, you can find Ayn Rand original content, video, audio, and you'll find Leonard Peikoff's all of his courses free. The app is free. And the courses are free. You'll find courses from the Ayn Rand University, from ARU. So check it out. Go to aynrand.org/start here, aynrand.org/start here. You'll get a link there to the relevant app store and download the app. All right. Let me thank John and David. Thank you for the stickers, and Roland and Enric. And Mike and Jason and Esoteric Dichotomy and Normative Randroid and Silvanos started us off. Thank you, Silvanos, and Gail and Jeffrey Miller is there, and Justin, and Jonathan Honing. So I think I caught all the stickers. Thank you guys for the stickers. I really appreciate that. I think we got a lot of people kind of doing stickers and a lot of people participating, which is great. I think what I'm missing today in order to get us to kind of the numbers are some of the whales. The whales are not here to push us over the threshold. The people who can write $100 stickers are 12 o'clock is not a good time for them. I have to adjust my schedule for that. That's good to know. All right, reminder. Keep asking questions. We've got plenty of time to answer them, so keep it up, particularly if you can do $20+ questions. Paul asks, what do you think of the poem, The New Colossus by Emma Lazarus on the Statue of Liberty? Give me your poor, your huddled masses yearning to breathe free. I mean, I like it. I like the idea that this is a country that accepts anybody who yearns to be free, that this is a country that does not discriminate against the poor, as Europe always had, as aristocratic societies always do, that in America, anybody could make it, that anybody could achieve. So send them over. You don't want them, right? Because they're poor and they're not of value to you, but they want to be free. And we have that creates massive opportunities right here in the United States. So I don't think it's altruistic. Remember, this is a poem written at a time of no welfare state, no redistribution of wealth, at a time where America was the land of opportunity, right? The land of opportunity. And as such, it's a poem that basically articulates this message of, we'll welcome anybody who wants to be free. And I guess you could add to that, understands what freedom means, understand what it means to be free. Thank you, Paul. All right, RDF, thank you for the sticker. Shazbot, thank you for the sticker, really appreciate it. And Blaze Guitar Lessons says that he is not a whale, but he is watching and supporting from Vietnam. That's a long way away. Are you living in Vietnam? Are you just visiting Vietnam? Just on vacation? Just touring around? What is the deal with Vietnam? And I'm curious how you find Vietnam. You like Vietnam? Are you enjoying it? So I am curious. All right, let's see. Ian. Did you see the piece in Fortune by a bunch of ex-CEOs titled, Is MAGA Going Marxist and Maoist? Trump's Assault on Free Market Capitalism. Excellent, and good to see some business people standing up. No, I didn't see that, and I agree with you that it's excellent, and I agree with the CEOs. There's no question that MAGA is leftist. It's going completely leftist when it comes to economics. If you follow Charlie Cook and you see the kind of nonsense he says on economics now, he used to be a big defender of capitalism. He completely rejects that now. If you see, of course, Tucker Carlson and Candace Owen, but if you see others, they're basically all become statists of the fascist kind, but they're all statists. I mean, if you see Donald Trump and you see administration, there is nothing capitalist or pro-capitalist or even a semblance of pro-capitalism in what Donald Trump is advocating for. So there is a real Marxist, Maoist tendency and a real, Maoist of whatever the leader says. We just go by the leader. The only thing MAGA seems to be excited about and willing to contradict Donald Trump on. It's not going to be tariffs, it's not going to be economics, it's not going to be taxes, it's not going to be government spending or deficit or anything like that. The only thing they're willing to do is if he says, there are two things really. If he contradicts any of their conspiracy theories. So the one thing that MAGA is willing to contradict Donald Trump on is COVID vaccines. But he's repudiated that and by appointing RFK, he's clear and he's clear and free of the blame for actually being the guy who got mRNA vaccines fast-tracked during COVID. The one good thing, one of the few good things he's done, he did in his first term. Very few things that he did that were good in his first term. And the second thing is, Epstein, Jeffrey Epstein. They're not willing to give up on that conspiracy theory, so he pissed them off on that. But pretty much anything else, he gets a free ride on. And again, in economics, they're all in with him on the kind of statist perspective. So no, I'll have to look and see who these ex-CEOs are, maybe, and see if I know any of them. It would be really interesting. All right, Blaze Guitar Lessons says, just visiting and working remotely. He says, I like it a lot. Vietnam is growing a lot, and the people I talk to want more freedom and capitalism. Yeah, I mean, they know. Andrew, I feel that the population is suffering from a postmodernistic disorientation where their minds can be convinced that 2 + 2 = 4 or equals 5, and that's a dangerous cultural state to be in. Of course, only philosophy is the core. Yeah, I mean, I definitely think that's true. I think this is the consequence of kind of, if you will, postmodern education and progressive education. Over the last 50 years, we've got a population that's very easy to manipulate, very easy to convince that A is non-A. Donald Trump is constantly talking about A is non-A. This administration is an A is non-A administration. They constantly contradict each other, and nobody seems to bother about it because that's our educational system. I mean, I've often talked about the fact that what our educational system is focused on is on emotion, on what they call emotional intelligence now, but on emotions, on getting along, on fitting in, on socialization. And when you raise kids from very, very young age to emphasize their emotion, to think only in emotion, then this is the world you get. Originally, we saw this in the early 20-teens with the whole microaggression. Oh my God, you hurt my emotions, and therefore it's the end of the world. And you can't say that, and it's okay to violate your free speech because you might hurt somebody's emotions. And now we're seeing it in that whatever you feel is true. That's the only thing that matters. It's emotions. And you're seeing it, it used to be just a leftist phenomena, and now it's left and right. Left and right are driven by emotionalism. And it really is the dominant, it's not a philosophy, but it's a dominant approach to living, the dominant approach to knowledge, in quotation marks. It's not real knowledge, of course. But yes, we become an emotionless society. Frank, this is Woodstock week. I don't know what that is. Ever attend a big rock festival? No, I haven't. A Woodstock movie I love, The Who, Santana. Also, shouldn't AOI be in a state like New Hampshire instead of California? Why? What is the state in which AOI is in relevant, right? Is AOI supposed to be in the freest state? Is New Hampshire the freest state? By what standard? By what criteria? But why should AOI be in the freest state? Shouldn't AOI, given that it's fighting against statism, maybe be in a statist state? I mean, or maybe AOI should just be where the people who work at AOI want to live. AOI, when it was founded, they should have taken a list of the states and gone somewhere they didn't want to live because they had to be in the freest place. I don't live in New Hampshire. Do you live in New Hampshire, Frank? Does every objectivist, is their commitment to live in New Hampshire? Should you live in the best place for you? Maybe the people who founded the university didn't like New Hampshire. Too cold, too East Coast, whatever. There's no commitment, right? There's no commitment to live in the freest state when, we're fighting for freedom at a level that makes New Hampshire seem like a statist place. And it is a statist place. Yeah, but we're not libertarians, Frank. New Hampshire is more libertarian by what standard? And we're not libertarians. So maybe that's a good reason to avoid New Hampshire. If you've seen the New Hampshire Libertarian Party posts on Twitter, then you would want to avoid New Hampshire with every fiber of your body and get out of it. I do not know any Woodstock movies. I'm not a huge Woodstock fan. I like some stuff by The Who. I like some stuff by Santana, but it's not my thing. I did not see the Woodstock movie. And if you've read what Ayn Rand wrote about Woodstock, she was very, very negative about Woodstock and everything that Woodstock represented. And Silvanos, I'm not saying emotions are blur. I'm saying emotions are not the standard for making decisions. Emotions are not the way to deal with the world. Emotions is how we experience life. Emotions are beautiful things, and they're great, and you should have emotions and cherish your emotions and experience your emotions and all of that. But emotionalism is letting emotions guide your life. It's letting emotions make your decisions. It's letting emotions dictate what is true and what is false. And that is not the job of emotion. It's not how emotions function. All right, Wes just showed up. Hey, Wes, thank you. Wes just did $50 a sticker to get us over our first hour goal, and that is amazing. Kabuta, why is it selfish for the U.S. to support Ukraine war? It's selfish because Russia is a real threat to the United States. Russia is a threat to American interests. And Ukraine is a country, and Russia is an aggressor. It's an aggressor nation, happy to violate the rights of other countries. And therefore, and it's an aggressor in Europe. And it's an aggressor who has nuclear weapons. And the last thing you want is the United States to have to go to war with Russia, because then you risk nuclear war. So the beauty of the Ukraine war is you have another country standing up to Russia, another country that could defeat Russia, give them a knockout blow, retard their aggressive ambitions by potentially years, if not decades. And all we have to do is give them our old weapon systems, give them some money and give them our old weapon system. It is the deal of the century to have the Ukrainians do the fighting for us. So instead of the United States having to commit to going to war with Russia, Ukraine is going to war with Russia and does the dirty work for us, which is excellent. So I think it's in our selfish interest, because if Russia wins, I think that'll bolster its case, it'll bolster its confidence, its aggression, and I think the next country to invade would be a NATO country, and then we, by treaty, and I assume we still abide by treaties, maybe not, we would have to go and defend a Balkan state or Poland or some other country that is part of NATO. And then you're looking at the potential of a third world war, because the United States will be fighting directly with Russia. The way to avoid World War III, or the risk of World War III, I don't want to sound hysterical, the way to avoid the risk of World War III is to support Ukraine in defeating Russia and do everything we can, short of sending troops, to make sure that they do defeat Russia. That is in our selfish interest. Matthias, given that the government's legitimate function is the protection of individual rights, what percentage of GDP should be allocated to fund it? Well, you'd have to really think that through. I don't know, right? And it would depend on the particular threats to individual rights that represent. How big should the defense budget be? How much of GDP right now is defense? Let's say it's $1 trillion for defense. GDP, US GDP is 30 trillion, I think. If it's 30 trillion, 1 trillion out of 30 is what percent? Somebody want to give me the percentage of 1 trillion out of 30. And then you've got some other functions that are dramatically smaller, maybe FBI, some Justice Department functions, and a few other things. Ultimately, all right, so 1 out of 30 is so what, 4%? If you include other stuff other than defense. And indeed, if you look at the 19th century, federal government spent between 2.5% to 3.5%. 2.5% to 3.5% basically is all the U.S. government spent federal government spend. I think that's about right. Maybe because we have a bigger army now and it's a standing army, maybe you'd have to go to 5%, but that's the most, not 22%. But probably 4%. But it does depend on the specifics of what you need in order to protect individual rights in a given situation, the world as it is today. All right, Dave just came in with a $50 question. Thank you, Dave. Do you think that those who advocate against body autonomy, anti-choice, just call it anti-abortion, for women are morally consistent when advocating against vaccination, science, anti-choice for everyone, both being anti-life for individuals? That's a good point. I mean, yes, and you could add to that being anti-euthanasia, right? Anti-suicide, anti the ability to kill yourself, you know, if you're diseased and dying anyway. They are anti-life. You know, basically the people who are anti-abortion are fundamentally anti-life. They're anti a woman's life to live her life on her terms. They're anti my life to be able to take whatever vaccine that I want. And of course, they're also anti-drugs and they're anti, you know, a lot of things that should be available to people. And then, of course, they're anti-euthanasia, which is, again, anti-life. To have a right to life means to have a right to end it. A true right to life means the right to be able to end a life. So, yes, it's all the same thing. It's all a disrespect for the individual, his choices, his control over his own body and mind. And of course, they want to control your mind as well if you follow through with them. So yes, there are many people out there who are anti-vax, right? Many people are anti-vax, and there are many people who are anti-mRNA vaccines, right? Particular vaccines that are incredibly effective, that people are condemning and attacking, and they don't want people to take. They want them banned. They haven't passed that yet, but that's what they want. So yes, I think there is a strong streak, certainly within MAGA, certainly within the right today, and in the far left, that are anti-science, anti a woman's right to her own body and her own choices, and you know, anti individuals making choices for themselves. Anti-life. They claim to be pro-life, but what they are is anti-life. Gail, can you explain who were the Vichy French during World War II? Yeah, the Vichy was a French government that basically controlled a big chunk of France to the south. This is after the Nazis had occupied Paris. And they were a nominally a French government that was allied with the Nazis. That is, they were a French government that was an ally of the Nazis and controlled the South. And that's who they were. They fought against the French resistance. They fought on behalf of the Nazis. They helped the Nazis round up the Jews to send to concentration camps. They were an arm of the Nazi regime. You know, RFK, if he had his way, and MAGA, if they had their way, they would ban vaccines. They wouldn't just not take them because they don't like them. Nobody has any problem with people making choices about what vaccines they take and which they don't, or very few people have a problem with that. They want to restrict our choices. Of course they do. Jason, I feel there should be an easier way for people to pool money to build a condo complex with individually owned units, but zoning seems geared towards rental-only development. Could that change? I mean, all of that is zoning. I mean, yeah, I mean, all constraints about what you do with with the property you build, whether you do it for rental or not for rental, or whether you sell it or rent it or whatever, should be up to you. There should be lots of options, and there should be lots of building, and the regulations and controls and zoning that constrain it or limit it should be moved away. And then we can see what economic models work and what economic models don't work. I think I answered the question. Gary Maynard, constant emergencies are the hallmark of a power luster. Absolutely, absolutely. And some emergencies are self-created, right? You create yourself. You know, if Trump's economic policies ultimately lead us to a recession, I'm sure he will declare an economic emergency because it's a recession, because we're in a recession, in order to fix it. And he'll blame Biden, and he'll blame the people who issued the statistics. He'll blame anybody, but take responsibility for it himself and use it as another opportunity for a power grab, as these power-lusting politicians always do. Gary, constant emergencies are the hallmark, oh, we just did that, of a power luster. It's worth repeating. That's good. Andrew, how is the art scene in Prague? I'm not in Prague, but the art scene in Prague is, I mean, first of all, the buildings are beautiful. Old Town Prague is quite pretty. There's a lot of Art Deco, and there's some good art in the museums. There's some good sculpture, public sculpture. There's, so the art scene in Prague is fairly good. I'm not in Prague. I'm in Lisbon. The art scene here is mediocre. The Iberian Peninsula did not produce the amazing art that Italy and France and the Netherlands did. I mean, Spain has some great artists, Velázquez and so on, but not on the scale and not in the numbers. Certainly very few sculptors on the scale of what was going on in the rest of Europe from the Renaissance through the 19th century. But Prague, yeah, there's a lot to see in Prague. Prague's a beautiful city. Blaze Guitar Lessons. Is Argentina's economy improving or booming? I mean, it's improving. I don't think it's booming in the sense of, the standard of living is now equivalent to the standard of living of Western Europe or something, or the United States. It's booming relative to where it was. So it's both improving and booming. So the booming is a consequence of its very, very fast improvement over what was. And again, there seems to be nothing that's slowing down that improvement in Argentina's economy right now. So Milei is doing a fantastic job. Just in case you think I only say bad things about all politicians. No, I think Milei is doing a pretty good job. About as good of a job as I'd expect any politician could be able to do. Better, actually. I'm surprised at how good of a job he's doing. WCZN Glyptotek, this is in Copenhagen, was excellent. Thorvaldsen Museum also, thanks for the recommendations. Absolutely. Yeah, Glyptotek is one of my favorite museums, certainly one of the best sculpture collections in the world. And Thorvaldsen is also excellent. And if you have a chance, go to the headquarters of the beer, I forget the name of the beer in Copenhagen, where you'll find more good sculpture and more good painting at the headquarters of the beer company. God, what's the name? Anyway, if you have time in Copenhagen, go check it out. Shazbat. Whoops. This is from Inglorious Bastards. This is Shoshana saying to the German soldier, quote, "If you're looking for a French girlfriend, I suggest you try the Vichy." Where do you have all these quotes just readily available like that, Shazbat? It's pretty amazing. I'm impressed. I can't remember anything. Never mind direct quotes from movies that are relevant to stuff we're just talking about and just come about. That's great. Frank says, at Woodstock, Hendrix got paid. Most other bands did not. That's because the giant crowd forced promoters to make it a free concert. Rock plus socialism. Yeah, it was a gathering of hippies. It was the hippie, the new left. It in every way, reflected the new left, the hedonism and nihilism of the new left. Rand has this great Apollo versus Dionysus, this great essay. You talk about emotionalism. Ayn Rand brings this out. Dionysus is the god of drunkenness. It's the god of emotionalism. And Woodstock is the symbol of emotionalism. And that is the beginning of everything going on now, everything we're experiencing now. I mean, the beginning is Kant, or maybe Plato, but certainly that was Woodstock was a milestone in making the hippies and their emotionalism a kind of bring it into the heart of American culture. WCZN, I'm nearly in Amsterdam. What to see there? Well, you definitely have to go to the big Amsterdam Museum, where you'll see a few Vermeers. You'll see some amazing Rembrandts. So there's a lot of really good painting. Not so much sculpture in the Netherlands. Not a sculpting culture, but a lot of great painting. A lot of great painting from the 16th, 17th, 18th centuries. And there's also a Rembrandt Museum, which is probably worth visiting. Rembrandt, even if you don't like him, it's worth learning to appreciate his genius. So again, you don't have to like all great painting, but it's worth being able to identify what makes the painting great. What else in Amsterdam in terms of art? Everybody goes to the Anne Frank Museum. It's definitely worth going. As a reminder of kind of the horrors of the Holocaust. There's a museum at The Hague which has a couple of Vermeers, I think, which is worth going to see if you can take a train. It's a pretty short hop to The Hague, and you can walk, I think, from the train station to the museum. See the paintings and come back. That's what I'd suggest. But Amsterdam is also a city to just walk around. It's a beautiful city. There's a lot just to see by just walking around and hanging out. Robert says, Apollo and Dionysus is a must-hear Ayn Rand speech, even if you love Woodstock and rock and roll. RDF, I think the left and right are becoming fascist. Do you agree? Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Mamdani is a socialist, but there's really not a lot of socialism on the left. Most, like people like Elizabeth Warren and even AOC, are mostly kind of economic fascists rather than socialists. That is, the state should control, regulate, and control business, not own the means of production, not own the grocery stores like Mamdani wants to do in New York. And I think what Mamdani will become, if he becomes mayor, he won't be a socialist mayor. He won't advocate. He ultimately will not have the city owns the means of production. Maybe he'll open one grocery store or something just to be symbolic. He will control. Rent control. The city won't own the blocks of apartments. They'll have rent control. They'll regulate businesses. There'll be much more economic statism, economic fascism than economic socialism. All right, guys. Thank you. You really came through on the super chat. We were way behind, and we did okay. We did okay. So thank you. Tomorrow's show. Let me just tell you what time tomorrow's show is going to be. Tomorrow's show is going to be at 9 p.m. my time, which is 4 p.m. your time. So 4 p.m. East Coast time. And on Friday, it'll be 4:30 p.m. East Coast time. 4:30 p.m. East Coast time. So tomorrow, 4 p.m. Friday, 4:30 p.m. And then I might do a show Saturday night. I have to think about what to do it on, but I might do a show on Saturday night as well. So stay tuned. But definitely tomorrow at 9 p.m. Friday, 9:30 p.m. or 10 p.m. 9:30 to 10, depending on where I am exactly. But so we're back to yeah, we're back to a more regular schedule, I guess, rather than the early schedule. Silvanos, sorry. I know Silvanos likes it when I do 12 p.m. Shows. All right, everybody, have a great rest of your week. I'm off to dinner, and I will see you guys all tomorrow. WCZN, thank you for the sticker. I appreciate that. Did I miss any other stickers? I don't think so. I think I got them all. Yes, Wes was the one before that. Again, thank you, Wes, for the $50 sticker. Thank you, Dean, for the $50 question. You guys made a huge difference on the Super Chat. And again, I'll see you all tomorrow. And we will continue, to be continued. There's no rest for those of us who cover the news.